Hey, good morning. Welcome back to the Worship Team Hangout. We are so glad that you guys are here to join us today. It's October the 14th, 2015. And man, we have a jam-packed show just for you. We also have Periscope people watching up live. So if you're not with us on Periscope, you can see the hearts right now at the lower end of the screen. Thanks so much for the hearts, guys. Be sure to follow us on Periscope, Worship Team Training, and you'll catch all the updates and live video devotionals, music stuff, and everything else that just comes out your way. But we have a more special show than that, because when you tune in, like you're doing right here through YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, we say thanks for all of our followers on Periscope. You guys are awesome, because today, we got a great show, and we have a special guest today. Chris Vacher is back. And man, I'm excited because this dude is awesome. He's up from Canada, or nobody knows where that is, and they don't care because it's Canada and it's not U.S., but that's okay. Look, no, kidding. Chris is doing a fantastic job at the C4 Church. Chris has done a lot of fantastic other things too in the worship community and the blogging community. So if you're not following him, please go to Chris from Canada on his website, also on Twitter and Facebook as well, and also his Periscope too. You can't miss that because he's got some great stuff, and he shows this worship team and does some incredible things. So this morning we want to say welcome. Look at that, Tony Guerrero is Periscoping with us right now. Thanks, Tony. How you doing this morning, Tony?
I'm good. I actually have no real idea what Periscope is, so I'm checking it out.
Yeah. You got on to me a couple of episodes ago because you said, now don't be doing too much of that Periscope now, because people are going to just not be watching anymore.
I said just don't be. Oh yeah. Don't. Yeah, right. I just meant don't do too many things that cause me to have to learn new stuff.
That's right. Awesome. And Tony, we need to schedule another webinar. By the way, you and I.
Schedule another webinar, by the way, you and I.
We need to schedule. That was a weird echo. Please turn that down. Okay, good. I think we're fixed now. Rich, was it you? Rich, how you doing this morning?
I'm doing good this morning. Very good.
Man. Yeah?
Yes, I am, sir.
I love the hair. You flat ironed your hair today, didn't you?
I slept on it.
It looks great. I love it. I don't have enough to flat iron my hair. I don't think Tony cares either.
It's called pillow iron, I think, today.
Pillow iron. Very good. Awesome. And so today we have our special guest, Chris Vacher. As you know, he is on the blogging community doing awesome stuff with worship leaders, worship teams, and we are so glad to have him back for what is this, a second or third time?
Yeah, second time.
Second time, awesome. So would you please welcome Chris Vacher. Chris, how are you today?
Well, I'm doing good. I'm happy to be here. I'm excited. It's Blue Jay playoff day, Game 5 tonight, and that's big news in the 6, as we call it. And so I've got my shirt on. And
dude, you're serious, man.
I'm excited about being with you today, and I'm excited about Blue Jays game time in 4 hours.
Thanks, Chris. Well, hey, I'm wearing blue right now. It's not Blue Jay blue, but it's some kind of blue.
But you're in Texas, right?
Yes, I am.
It might be Heartbreak City for Texas tonight.
I know.
We'll see.
But that's okay. That's not why people tuned in today. So thanks for that. So today we are talking. We were having a discussion earlier about among worship leaders and pastors, and the idea of counterfeit leadership and counterfeit worship. You know what we're talking about. The guys that get up and either lead worship and you know it's fake, you know it's not real, or maybe it's the leaders that you're leading worship with in the senior leadership that you feel are not being as sincere or as authentic. And how does that rub you the wrong way as a worship leader? What about the folks in the church? So we talk about transparency because people really do get it. They really do see it. So let's go to our first question. Tony, because it's been a while since we've had you, and so excited to have you back today. So here it is. First question, ready to go? What is a counterfeit leader? When we talk about counterfeit, what does that mean in a leader in the church?
We are all counterfeit leaders because every single one of us has gotten up there on the platform and been distracted or not been entirely focused on God or not having connected with God or we're more concerned with the task at hand, with how we look, how we sound, if the band's going to remember stuff. I mean, ultimately to me, the worship leader is somebody who is engaged 100% in worshiping God, and we as a people are so attracted to that and so drawn to that idea that it's like a reflection. I always posit the worship leader at sort of an angle, like we're down here watching, and our vision should just bounce off of that person like he's a mirror.
Wow.
Because we're not, but the minute we're watching him or watching what's going on, and so I think we should all approach it that way, that we're counterfeit every single time unless we get our hearts in the game really intentionally. And just along those lines, I think the chapter 5 of the book of Amos 5:21.
Yeah.
In fact, I'll pull it up, and just there is something we should keep in mind during this conversation. Oh, it says, this is God speaking, and he says, I despise your religious festivals. Your assemblies are a stench to me. Even though you bring me burnt offerings and grain offerings, I will not accept them. Though you bring choice fellowship offerings, I will have no regard for them. And here's the big one. Away with the noise of your songs. I will not listen to the music of your harps, but let justice roll on like a river, righteousness like a never-failing stream. Now, if you just read that out of context, it seems as if that's going to be God speaking to non-believers or to the heathens, or but who he's speaking to is us. He's speaking to Christians or believers who are not truly engaged in worshiping God. And I think that's a really important thing for us to think. In fact, I coach a team of college worship students, and right before they took the platform, we talked about this, and I just said, I said, I want you to go out there and think about the fact that God could be hating your worship right now.
Wow.
Not ignoring it, but hating it.
Wow.
That's what that verse does to me, is God can hate our worship. That's such a big word. I mean, he doesn't use the word hate very often.
No.
But there it is. So
No. That's good, man. Rich, what's your thought on that?
One of my senior pastors, in a very vulnerable moment, said something to me. He says, Rich, sometimes our gifting and our character don't match. And what that really means is you can get out there and people spiritually can be blessed by what you're doing because it's what you're gifted to do.
Mm-hmm.
So
that's good.
A lot of pastors can preach and win people to Christ and build a church, and a lot of worship leaders as well can get up there, and spiritually they're spiritual beings and God's going to use them. We're imperfect at our best point. So and obviously, when there's that disparity, eventually, things crash or they have to be corrected. But I think what he said was really true. And so when it comes to counterfeit, what it is checking that and being sure that we're not resting on that giftedness, and that is not what we're leading only by. The fact that we could move a room, the fact that they can, celebrate and on their own worship God, which they don't need us anyway. So of course God's going to allow them to worship. So really, that's that part that Tony says of hating is really, us hiding behind perhaps the gifts that we have. And so I think that's what a counterfeit leader, in my estimation, would be.
Yeah, that's good.
Thank you, Chris. What are your thoughts about a counterfeit leader? You
Yeah,
think Rich is right?
Yeah, I'm just being impacted by listening to these two guys, and I'm reflecting even in my own church, in my own life, and like, man, when have I been like that, and what are some things I need to encourage worship leaders at my church to reconsider? I think the flip of the Amos 5 passage is John 4, right? The Father seeks worshipers who are worshiping in spirit and truth. And so how do I then, as a worship leader or leading other worship leaders, help them lead that kind of worship? Because that's the positive of the Amos 5 warning.
Right.
And I think the other side of the counterfeit thing is, worship leaders, leading in a way that's trying to imitate somebody else. So I'm going to lead like I think Chris Tomlin would lead, or I'm going to lead the way I think Matt Redman would lead, or I'm going to lead the way I think Carrie Job would lead, rather than, like, God has called you to be a leader of that church, that congregation, that event, whatever it is, and so you lead like you would lead, and don't, in the moment of trying to play the part of somebody else, I think we've all seen people like that, where the counterfeit side of trying to be somebody you're not, or trying to fit into the mold of what you think another worship leader would do in that moment. That's a dangerous thing too, because in a sense that's the counterfeit, or the disingenuousness of not being who God has created you to be, and not being the leader that God has called you to be for the church that God needs you to be in that moment.
Awesome. So let's flip it a bit more. You guys ready for this one? We're talking about inauthentic worship leaders, and you're right. I mean, a lot of us try to, in our minds, we see one image, and yet we try to project that same, or we're not being true to ourselves. It runs both ways. So what about this? What about, how does one authentically worship when they are led by inauthentic leaders? Now, that could be you as a worship leader, and you're leading with a pastor who you're knowing that things are not, ringing true, or somebody in your staff, or somebody on your team. You want to take another stab at that, Chris?
Yeah. So we were talking about this before we started. Is like, whose perspective are we talking about? So I think for a congregation with a worship leader, I think we know this intuitively, but we maybe forget as worship leaders, is congregation, people in the audience can tell right away.
Yeah.
What's real and what's not.
How can they tell?
I think there is sort of this intuitiveness to it, because we've all seen people, politicians, performers, whatever it is, and we just know they don't believe what they're actually saying. And so we don't believe what they're saying, because we know that they come at, they're even lacking conviction. So I think it's a good check for worship leaders. If you get to a place in your leadership where, like, your heart is not into it, and it might be a personal issue, might be a faith issue, might be a family issue, might be a job issue, whatever it is. It's probably obvious to the people you're leading before it's obvious to you. I think in the job scenario, working for a pastor where there's some counterfeit issues, that gets to a whole lot of stuff. I'm really thankful, because I've always had great senior pastors to work with, and I'm really, really thankful for that. I talk with a lot of worship leaders who are frustrated and they're struggling in their job, and at the end of the road, there does come a point where you have to decide, the option might be to leave that place, and if you're not willing to leave the place, then you've got to figure out, how are you going to serve the pastor that God has called you to serve? How are you going to serve the church that God has called you to serve in a way that's not kind of going against the personal things that God has called you to? At the same time, my job is not my personal playground to get my artistic way every time.
Wow, now you hit something. You hit another nerve, Chris.
Okay. Well, maybe that's another show. Let's go there sometime.
All right, let's go there. So, Tony, you're the man who hits it hard there. So let's hear from you. What about that? Are people just doing it to satisfy their own creative need? Pastor.
Well, we humans have a tendency to make an idol out of just about anything. So, yeah, if you're sticking at a church because the check is good, or because it's a big church and you're getting a lot of fame there, or whatever the reason is, and you're in the wrong place, you've made an idol out of that. There's so many things we need to watch on that. In response to the main question there, yeah. Worship is an individual responsibility. So the idea that I'm to worship my God falls on me regardless of my surroundings, regardless of whether anybody else is getting it right around me. So it's a personal responsibility. The worship leader, much like a coach on a team or a head chef in a kitchen, is kind of the trained organizer. They're not more of a worshiper than the person in the congregation. They're the one who's been trained to sort of organize this group of people into this atmosphere. And but the individual players on the team, or the individual cooks in the kitchen, still need to know their stuff. And so it's still a personal responsibility to worship, regardless of the surroundings. The leader also has the additional responsibility of training, because not every congregation member understands what it is to worship or knows what that means, especially new believers. And so the worship leader, the pastor, that we assume the responsibility of training people, teaching them that as well. But we're no better as leaders, we're no better worshipers than anybody else in the crowd. And I think, Chris, I'm really glad you brought up that one verse, because really the answer to all this entire topic is, what does it mean to worship in spirit and in truth?
Yeah.
And I'm just now understanding the truth aspect of that. Like, the amount of times that we're told in Scripture, don't even come to the altar until you've dealt with all this other stuff, you know? Like, there is so much truth that we mask when we hit that worship stage. I think if we really examined the truth in our lives and the truth in our approach to worship, we'd probably all be hanging our heads in shame a lot more than we do.
Yeah.
But I think that's the key, is that worshiping in spirit and truth is really, maybe we need to devote a whole hour to just unwrapping what does that really mean, because it's sort of a lofty sounding thing, but I don't know that everybody, myself included, always gets what that means, spirit and truth, like to really define what that means in a worship setting.
Yeah. Rich, you want to take a go at that?
Yeah, I would say that there are times that we will not know it's inauthentic. And I think that that's a fact. I have friends, telling me a leader who was doing terrible things backstage, and then said, "Watch this," goes on and just totally schools the room, and things happening spiritually and great, right?
Right.
So I think, as leaders, we have a unique responsibility because of that, because of the gifting that we have, because of the ability that we have. And so how does one authentically worship? You realize it's not about the leader, it's about Christ. And if you look at it, in the traditional sense of, we come around a table, not a person.
Yeah.
And the person at the table is Jesus, not us, the worship leader.
Right.
And when we put the worship leader on a platform and put lights on it and put subwoofers on it and put style on it, and we think that through that person or that worship team, vicariously we can worship, that is really us being inauthentically led by a system that we believe in. I think sometimes that fails us. If we're thinking that way, if we come with a purpose that we're going to own our worship experience, as Tony was saying, then we have a whole different view of that. Then the leader itself is irrelevant. Just like a pastor who preaches, it's not like the Pope up there. The word is the word is the authority. And then, of course, the altar, or figuratively, if you don't have an altar, the idea that there is an altar that's there, that we remember, that itself absolves us, or absolves the leaders, in the sense that we don't have an excuse as a worshiper to put that on the leader. So you come to church and you want to inspect everything, you want to look at scorekeeping on how it goes. That's the problem. But if you expect, as what could God do? What could I bring? What have you come to say? What have you come to bring? As leaders, that's what we do. We facilitate. I think oftentimes we over-spiritualize our importance, and therefore this becomes a bigger issue than it has to. We're really just like plumbers who really are turning on, the water and electricity and things for the family to come. Just like the building provides a place, we provide a venue and an experience. But I think oftentimes what happens is we get snookered into the idea that this is we are a lot more important, and that our worship leader is a lot more important.
Right.
Wow. Chris, what's that like for you and your church? I mean, how do you deal with all these things going back and forth?
Yeah, I mean, so Rich and I have known each other for a long time. Tony and I are just kind of meeting this way right now, and so I appreciate what both of them are saying. And there's the two sides, right? Like, Jesus is really important, and without Jesus, the worship doesn't. And at the same time, I think the leader does have an important role to play, and that's why not just anybody can be a leader. And there's some things that we learn as we do this. So I'm coming up to 20 years being a worship leader, and I still feel like I'm just beginning. And in understanding how do we lead an event, an experience, and not just kind of the liturgy, but also how do we help people move from the Monday to Saturday life they've been living to now we're gathered together on Sunday, whenever it is, and we're trying to actually lead people through an event, through an experience. I'll often will use Psalm 121 to remind myself. I lift my eyes to the hills. where does my help come from? And there's a lot tied up just in that verse. But in my mind, that's the kind of the attitude of people when we come in is we've got these hills in our lives and there's distractions, and the hills actually, in the context of that psalm, there's these altars to other gods up in these hills. And so the worship leader is saying, like, look up and see these distractions in your life and these things that are in place as tributes to other gods. And then the call is, where does our help come from? And my job as a worship leader, one of my jobs, is over the course of the 60 minutes, 90 minutes, however much time we have together, is to help refocus people's attention away from kind of these altars and the hills of their lives and refocus to Jesus. My help comes from the Lord, the maker of heaven and earth. And if we can do that like week after week after week after week, through the word, through song, through communion. Yeah, this idea, Rich, it's beautiful, like coming around this table together as family, as brothers and sisters. If we can do that, while at the same time authentically, I think, saying we never have it all together, and there are weeks when we have it together more, and there are weeks when we have it together less, but part of the calling on my life, like this priestly duty I have, is to serve other people continually, week after week after week, and like redirecting their attention, because I think our affection follows our attention, right? The things of our hearts follow the things we pay attention to, and vice versa. Our attention goes to the things that our hearts long for. So if we can do that with people week after week after week, we begin to generate this like liturgical rhythm, not just in Sunday, but in our whole week. And Psalm 121, the pattern is basically over the course of your whole life. You're coming out, you're going in for now and forevermore. And so, eventually we'll go out for the last time, and God will call us to come in a new way for the first time. And if my job as a worship leader, as sort of like a pastor to these people thinking about worship, if we've done that Sunday after Sunday after Sunday for a lifetime, I think there is an authenticity to the leader that can say, I can do that as part of my training and my experience and my skill set, while also admitting there are Sundays when I'm coming in and like my wife and I just had a real big blow up the night before, or man, my kids said something to me this morning and it shot me to the heart because they said something really tough about me and I know it's true and I got to deal with that. Or my relationship with my pastor is not so great right now, but the calling to shepherd these people and pastor these people in some ways supersedes the momentary condition of my relationship with my pastor.
Right. Man, that's awesome. Thanks, Chris. Tony, when we're talking about, all these different changes and, there's that need, hopefully there's that desire for those to want to get healthy. So how does a worship leader pastor get healthy? I'm kind of combining the last two questions. How do they get healthy and grow authentically as a worshiper and as a leader?
It really has less to do with being a worship leader, doing it as a worship leader. I think it's more to do with just our spiritual journey in general. That, again, like I said, it's a personal responsibility that we recognize, acknowledge, seek to understand, and worship our God, our Creator. To me, it's that time spent not practicing your craft or watching a seminar like this, or there's a separate skill to being a worship leader over being becoming an authentic believer. I think when you're an authentic believer in your life, that will then invade your worship leading. So I don't know. I know I'm not saying this correctly the way it's in my head, but it's a personal thing that we do. It's not a worship leading thing we do. That we become authentic with our God. And sometimes, really the truth, sometimes the most authentic worship leaders might be those who say, I can't lead worship today. My heart's not right. God is telling me to go do that, like to go deal with this conflict first, or whatever it is. That might be the more authentic thing, is when our spiritual life is so in tune with God that everything else falls aside, including our ability to lead people in worship. And Boy, I wish I was saying that all correctly. I know in my head I sound really smart.
That sounded smart. Sounded
Out of
good.
my mouth, I sound like an idiot. But I do think it's interesting. I just want to go back real quick to something Chris said. But I think it's interesting that we, and I may be missing something, but I can't think of an example in Scripture where somebody was appointed to lead the music because they were so spiritually sound. It was because they were skilled at it. That's why they're appointed, because they're trained and skilled at doing it. And so we have that one aspect where we are trained and skilled to do what we do, and we're, like I said, we're the organizers. We know how to do this. But the spiritual thing, that's an individual task that we have to handle with us and our God, whether we're worship leaders or not.
Wow. Awesome. Rich,
I would
go.
go back to what I was saying about your gifting. It's exactly jumping off what Tony was just saying. Because of my gifting, I'm going to be on a platform and I'm going to be doing these things, but I'm just like somebody in the 17th row or 5th row out there. I have to prepare myself exactly the same way to come to church. My gifting is going to, because I can't sit out there like that guy, I may not be able to enjoy my own gifts. So I'm going to have to find a way, being in a leadership position, that I can be whole and healthy. And I think worship leaders, what we do sometimes is we embed our role with our identity to a degree. Just like a musician, we embed our musician identity with all of our identity. Where I might be a musician, but that's not all of who I am.
Yeah.
And it goes to this phrase that if worship is everything, worship is nothing. And the point there is what am I setting apart? What am I making holy that I'm keeping for God? If I keep the Sabbath holy, I'm keeping something apart. And I wrote an article about this last week that, sometimes we say, oh, there's no divide. Well, there is a divide, because there's certain things that I act as a married person that are reserved for nobody else, etc. There's certain things that are given to taxes that aren't given for other things. So what that means is, when it comes to worship as a leader, how do I have to, like everybody else, I have to see that. I have to go to that point that's sacred. I have to be willing to take my entire self there before God, not say I have a compartmentalized life, but I'm going to be a complete person, so I can be authentic in front of people. So really, just a summary of that is my gift is one thing, and how I form my life is a bunch of other things that they are connected, because I'm a human being, but I have to find a way, because I'm a leader, that's even harder perhaps to stay, and community is a big deal in that.
Yeah.
Finding people who are honest, where I can go have someone's gifts speak into my life like God's using me.
So we had a question real quick. Do you think that church pastors, leaders appoint music leaders mostly due to skill or God in them?
I assume God's in them. So
Periscope question.
I have a very negative answer for that. I think a lot of pastors appoint worship leaders because of how they look and perform.
Yep.
I think there are so many people who are in those positions because they've spent so much time learning how to be Bono, and they bought the skinny jeans and whatever else it is. And
but it's been 20 years for Bono. I mean, I
think the truth is, a lot of pastors and church leaders, they don't know music. They know what they like.
Yeah.
They don't know music, so they can't look at the skill necessarily. But what they can look at is, wow, I am wowed by him as a front man.
Right.
And I think a lot of people end up in the job because of that. And that's a gift. That's a great skill to have. But I think, unfortunately, a lot of people end up in the job because of that, and all the other things that need to go along with the job aren't there. Sometimes it's spiritual things are lacking. They don't know how to administrate. They don't know how to run a choir or whatever. But they spend time learning how to be in a rock band. And I think we have a lot of that in the church. I love the model of a pastor over the worship team, and then a bunch of worship people working under that. But it's not always the best to have a worship leader be the head over the whole department because they aren't trained in all these things. And
Right.
this would have to be unpacked. I'm generalizing in a big way, but
Bob Coughlin wrote a great article maybe about a month ago where he was talking about, rather than thinking about worship pastors, think about pastors who are musical. And I think it was really helpful for me. I think it's really helpful, especially as we go forward in churches, and we're facing this that's real close to us in Canada, where I think fewer and fewer churches are going to have, like what you're talking about, Tony, where like my full-time gig is leading every Sunday, leading the band, choosing the songs, because the scope of the job is so big. And honestly, I think there are fewer people that want to pursue that as a career. But I think more and more what we need to see, and this is like the next phase of my life, is training pastors who are musical. And so your primary calling is pastoral. You have the skill set of a musician, so you can help worship leaders to choose songs. You can help worship leaders transition. You can help worship leaders lead congregational prayer. You can help choirs, whether you use them every Sunday or just for special occasions. But your primary role and function isn't as the Sunday morning upfront worship leader. I think we're going to see more and more of that, and there's conversation like I would love to see Bible colleges train more from that perspective rather than primarily your primary skill is musical, but to think more pastorally, but you are musical and you can think that way.
Right.
yeah, it's good.
Very good.
We just want to be impressive is I think the problem here, and we're not. No, it's just this. Let's get something impressive up there.
Are you talking about Chris?
Well, Chris is impressive, but it's just let's attract people with the rock star, as opposed to let's develop people in our family who have these skills. And if we were to develop people, which is what pastors do, we would, whether they're musical or not, I think we would have so much different conversation. But really, it's a paradigm shift for a lot of leaders to step back and say, what are those gifts that Tony was mentioning that are needed? So you have a chart that's readable. I mean, it's possible to have people with different skill levels, if you're a good music director, to actually make them successful. That's a skill. And so these are things that my hope is that people would learn that, because, again, I don't think it's because of lack of desire for the best thing. I think it's just misinformation.
Right. Good. Cool. Well, that does it for us today, guys. We are out of time, so sorry. This was an awesome YouTube episode with Chris Vacher, and also great Twitter. We're getting a lot of great response and a lot of great viewers out there. So thanks so much for all you guys, YouTube and Periscope, hanging with us today. Most importantly, Chris, thank you for hanging with us today and sharing your heart and your time.
My pleasure. Thanks for the invite, Brandon.
Yeah. Dude, we need to have you back again. This will be. Is this second or third time again?
This is second. Come to Canada. We'll film an episode on location.
That would be awesome. I would love that.
I always thought it was Canada. I'm sorry. That was my
You can come too. We'll help you.
Well, no, you put an A at the end of everything. That's how Canada came up with, right?
C, A.
A, so Rich A, Chris A, Canada. Rich, hey, thanks again for joining us. You, man, are incredible, and we really appreciate how you're just bringing so much to our YouTube Hangouts and also the new webinars that we have launching off. So thank you and being here today.
My honor to be with you guys. You guys are great. Thank you so much.
You bet. And, of course, the man of the hour who is trying to play with the Google effects as we speak.
I just wanted this.
That's where Tim is coming at you.
Oh.
There you go, right there, baby. That's it. You guys catch that? That's wow. Look at that.
That's R.K. Timmons.
Exactly. But all seriousness, in all seriousness, Tony has been with us for the long ride here and has been doing a lot of great stuff here at Worship Team Training. We recently had a webinar just last month. We're going to be doing some more webinars together with Rich, but Tony, we got to put another webinar together about developing quality and taking it up a notch. So
correct all the stuff we said last time.
Yeah, correct all this. We'll go back and edit. Massive, huge. So anyway, thanks, Tony. Appreciate you, bro. Great to see you. And you guys today, hey, thanks so much. Everybody watching us on Periscope. You guys are great, fantastic. Thanks so much for being with us today. And YouTube Live, we love you guys. Thank you for watching us through Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Google, Pinterest, wherever else. You guys are great. Thanks for the hearts. Thanks for sharing this out with all your worship leaders and your pastors, because this is important. And check it out. Tomorrow, we're not done yet. Tomorrow, we have the most fantastic lady of all, Sally Morgenthaler. Look, are you worship leader right now, pastor? Are you looking for God's next step in ministry? Or do you feel like a misfit in your church right now? Do you feel like you don't fit in your culture? Or maybe you're having a hard time with the surroundings? Well, Sally has got a great message and word for you, and that's in terms of learning how to get healthy and staying where you're at, or if it is searching for the next position that God has for you, because this goes way beyond you trying to create a slick resume or a good-looking video, but it has everything to do with the heart of the leader, and that's what we're going to talk about tomorrow night, 8 p.m. Central Standard Time, October 15th, 2015. That's tomorrow, 8 p.m. Central Standard Time. Please go back to worshipteamtraining.com/events. Again, that's worshipteamtraining.com/events, and we will shoot out the link to you. You can also watch it on playback. So if you buy it today, you can watch it on playback the following day when we get it back up on the site, so don't miss it. You guys rock also, Periscope. Thank you guys so much. So without further ado, coming up later this month, we have Ross King's going to come back, and then we have a new guest, Larry Robinson, out from Atlanta. Larry is a fantastic gospel worship leader, and I can't wait to have him because this guy's a hoot. We've been talking back and forth on both Periscope and Twitter. Just a great heart, great guy. So I can't wait to introduce him to the rest of the gang here. So again, Tony, thanks for joining us today as always. Rich, hats off to you, or mustache that is. Chris, thank you so much for the earbuds and the chickens. Thanks for the chickens.
Go Blue Jays.
Blue Jays. All right, guys, we love you. Thanks for coming back to us. We'll be back with you on the next Worship Team Hangout with Ross King. So may God's blessings flow to you and your worship team. We'll see you guys back soon. Thanks.